I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. We have quite the lineup today. I've sifted through hours of content and conversations, and this is part 2 of some of my favorite snippets. We have Simon Sinek, Sacca, Tony Hsieh, and Sophia Amoruso. The reason I started this podcast was not just to inspire. That's important, but we have a lot of that available to us. I really wanted to provide some tangible, literal tips and takeaways that we can implement and use in stories, examples that we can apply to our own lives. And that's exactly what you're going to hear today. First off, we have Simon Sinek. Simon is a visionary, and he's able just to see and articulate things in a way that is extremely powerful. And his success and numbers and views on TED Talks and everything else really demonstrate that. We talk through his decision-making process and his own why not now moment that kind of started his whole journey through becoming the why guy. I hope you enjoy it. Here's Simon. Before we hop into this episode, let me fill you in on a little secret of mine. That's Headspace. It's a guided meditation app, and I never imagined that doing something for 10 minutes a day could increase my quality of life so much. I've always struggled with knowing when to make things happen versus when to let things happen. Sometimes things go very well when I push on the gas, and sometimes not so much. It gets me into trouble. Headspace has helped me with learning how to trust my intuition. And I've tried meditation off and on for years. It's never stuck, but this time it has. I've made a very intentional shift in my morning routine, and that's to wake up, have my coffee, do Headspace, journal, and then I check my email, my social media, all of my devices. It's been a big shift, but great result. My aunt used to say, don't let anything rent space in your head for free. That's valuable real estate. Headspace allows me to be a much better landlord of my thoughts, especially first thing in the morning. You can go to headspace.com/whynotnow for a free trial. And if you stick around to the end of the show, I'll tell you how you can get a month for free. Can you think of a time when you had been thinking about doing something for a long time, and then you thought to yourself, okay, this is it. Why not now? And talk us through not only what that was, but how you took the first step and what it looked like and what was going through your mind.
Well, I think I've been very lucky in the sense that a lot of my why not now experiences were kind of like I couldn't say no. I guess I could have, but momentum was involved. In other words, I remember I had this idea. Believe it or not, I had a bunch of years ago. I had a meeting with the Bahraini ambassador to the United States. I don't ask me how I found it. It was a complete accident. There was no TED Talk. There was no book. I just found myself in this weird meeting, and I was sharing ideas about some of the things they could do in Iraq. This is long ago, to unify the population. And the ambassador got so excited. He said, have you shared this with the Iraqi ambassador? And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding me? I don't even know how I got myself here, And I'm like, no, I don't know the Iraqi ambassador. And so he stands up and he walks over to his desk and he calls the Iraqi ambassador. And he says, you got to hear this idea. And then he comes back to me and says, here's the phone number, call his office, go see him tomorrow. And so, I didn't have any assistance or help or team. It was me. I was chief cook and bottle washer and did everything. And so I called and I made an appointment at the Iraqi embassy. And I remember I was in a suit, which, that should tell you how long ago this was. And I was sitting in the back of a taxi going to the Iraqi embassy. And I remember being unbelievably nervous. But the point is like the wheels were set in motion, and I remember having a conversation with myself in the back of the taxi. I remember being super nervous. And I remember thinking to myself, you have a choice to make here, which is if you get intimidated by this, if you can't relax, then this is going to be a one-off experience and you'll never do anything like this again. I said, or you can get used to this and just accept that this is going to be your life from now on. You're going to start having a surreal, crazy life, and you got to get used to this, the fact that this is your life now. And so for me, I guess the why not experience was the acceptance of the momentum, the acceptance of the fact that there will be wheels set in motion, that I can choose to stay on the train or jump off the train. So mine wasn't about jumping on the train. Mine was about staying on it or choosing to jump off. And I remember the distinct conversation. I remember everything about that day. It was so seminal that I had to learn to accept the ride. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow. And you had that conversation with yourself, and you had the self-awareness, I guess, to know what to say and question yourself. Do you find that you've been practicing that over years, and that's been something that you worked up to be able to know I need to have this conversation with myself and need to decide?
I think it came more from being the advice giver to friends. Mm-hmm. I remember, that friends would come to me saying, I have this opportunity, but I don't know if I should take it. And I remember being the one giving the advice going, what do you have to lose? So, you fail and maybe you lose a bit of money and you lose a bit of time. Maybe you're humiliated. Like, you got to try. Like, I remember being the one giving the advice to friends on a regular basis. And so sometimes I think we often give better advice than we follow, and we give good advice to our friends and then we don't follow our own advice. And I think the impetus I don't think it was so much self-awareness. I think I found myself in a situation that I would have given me the advice to just say thank you, be grateful for the ridiculous situation I find myself in, and just enjoy the journey. And I found myself forced to take my own advice. I don't think it's anything. I think it was as simple as that, to be honest.
And when we met a few years ago, I was going through probably one of the rockiest times in my life with a divorce. I was just over capacity as it related to my career and travel, having some health issues. And quite frankly, I didn't really like myself that much. And the outside didn't match the inside. And you helped me talk through my why, which I am forever grateful for. And we'll definitely talk more about that in a minute. But after we had lunch, you walked me over to the bookstore nearby and you bought me 2 copies of Man Searching for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. One for me, and you gave me another one to give to someone else, which since then I have done that. And a lot of times I get it back so I can re-gift it again. Why did you do that? And what does that book mean to you?
I think it's, people always say, if you could recommend one book, and that's the book I recommend. Mm-hmm. It's a profoundly simple idea told under extreme circumstances. Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor. This is not a Holocaust account, as you know. But when he was shipped off to Auschwitz, I think at the age of 13 or something, 14, something like that, he was confronted with this reality that all of these people who were facing the same horror, some had the will to live and some didn't. And he couldn't understand why everyone who faced the same horrible circumstances, why some had a sense of optimism and some had a sense of pessimism. And one of his conclusions was we cannot control the circumstances around us. All that we can control is our attitude. And that's great advice to give to somebody in a job or who's got some family issues, but they can always find a way to dismiss the advice. Yeah, but And so when it's told through the eyes of the Holocaust, it's like there's nothing going on in your life that you can rationalize dismissing this good advice if that was the thing that saved his life and the life of many others, the lives of many others. And so it's just a profoundly simple idea told through such extreme and exaggerated circumstances that it makes the lesson that much more profound, I think. And there are many times in my life where I catch myself being a victim of circumstances and then realizing it's my attitude, not the circumstances, that's making a situation from bad to worse, or even good to bad, or innocuous to bad,
Yeah, it's such a simple concept, but it's so huge. And that book really does it doesn't give you an out, It's so awesome. And thank you for that.
And it's not a business book. It's not like, it's such a foreign, it's so foreign in terms of our ability to relate to the situation that the only thing you can learn is the lesson.
Right. And it's short.
Without having our heads down, writing something, right? And the idea of letting your mind wander. When do you think ideas happen? Do you think ideas happen? Do you think you're struck with great ideas, when we're replying to emails and going through our inboxes? Of course not. Our ideas happen when we go for a run, when we're lying in bed, when we're staring out the window on a long drive, when we are standing in the shower. We have our great ideas when we give our minds opportunities to wonder. And this is a very biological thing, which is when we go into the quote unquote brainstorming session, what we're doing is we're accessing our neocortex, our conscious brains, right? Our quote unquote expertise. And our conscious brains have access to the equivalent of about 2 feet of information around us. So when we put all of our best ideas on the wall during the brainstorming session, we're accessing about 2 feet of information around us. Our limbic brains, which is our subconscious brain, it has access to about 11 acres of information. So every conversation, every movie, every book we've ever read, everything is filed away somewhere. And the value of the brainstorming session is not to come up with the answer. The value of the brainstorming session is to ask the question, because our minds won't solve problems that haven't been posed. It won't answer questions that haven't been asked, right? So once the question is asked, our minds will continue to quote unquote think, or thinking is really conscious. So let's call it wonder. Our minds will continue to wonder about W-A-N-D-E-R, right? Or W-O-N-D-E-R in this case. Will wonder about this problem. And so when you're standing in the shower, you don't even realize your mind was engaged. The idea seems to pop out of nowhere and just smack you in the head and be like, oh my God, that's the solution. And you come to work and be like, okay, I have the solution. I had it came up with the idea in the shower this morning, right? And so I'm a great believer in the brainstorming session to ask the question, but don't expect to have the solution that day. Ask the question, and then a week or 2 weeks later, just watch what happens and wait. It's how I write books too, which is my mind. I don't come up with ideas based on nothing. I pose to myself very, very difficult questions. Where do trust and cooperation come from? And then every book, every movie, every conversation I have, all of a sudden I become hyper aware and I start seeing patterns and I start paying attention to things I wasn't paying attention to before. And I'll be standing in my bathroom brushing my teeth and I'll just start having crazy ideas to solve this problem, right? Or to answer this question. And so if we don't give our minds time to just wander, W-A-N-D-E-R, now we are literally forcing our conscious brains to solve all the problems, which is stupid. So go for a walk, go for dinner. When your friend goes to the bathroom when you're at dinner for them, don't pull your phone out. Why don't you just look around a restaurant for 5 minutes? You don't have to be engaged all moments of all days, because you will have ideas. You'll see somebody walk across, do something, say something. You'll be like, oh my God, that's it, right? We cannot have innovation and great ideas if we're not allowing our limbic brains, our subconscious brains, to help us solve the problems that we face.
Absolutely. It makes so much sense. And every brainstorming session I've been in, that's been the case, where you usually you end up having a little bit of space between that conversation and then the big aha. Absolutely.
And these aren't accidents. This is biology. This is not my opinion. This is how the brain works. And what we're doing in our modern day and age by forcing our brains to be engaged in neocortical or rational activities all moments of all days, we're disallowing our brains to be at their natural best. Yeah. It's our fault that there's no innovation in our companies. It's our fault that we struggle to solve difficult problems.
Do you meditate? Okay. Right on. And what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would definitely tell me, you don't have to know all the answers. And if you don't have to pretend that you do.
Oh, that's a good one. I wish I would have had that advice. Next up is Chris Sacca. You may have seen him on Shark Tank. He's also an angel investor, has a very, very successful firm, and he has one of the most intelligent and I guess just successful business minds in all of the land, really. Chris is pretty incredible, and in this specific clip, Chris talks about the difference between his point of view and maybe what other people were thinking outside of himself, and it just reminds us to run our own race because even though things might appear to look really good from the outside, that doesn't mean that they're right for you. And just because you're really good at something doesn't mean you enjoy doing it too. So here's Chris.
There's been a bunch of those times. I think basically my life and my career are hallmarked by some really pivotal moments that frankly ended up being not something I'd milled on for a long time, but just kind of pulled the trigger and wrote it out. But one of those in particular was when I decided to quit Google. The year was 2007. I just wrapped 4 years at Google. And so I invested into my original stock grant, which wasn't very much compared to most Googlers. I was worth less than $1 million, which is an insane amount of money for everyone in the whole world, except for someone who was at Google, because when I got there, I was kind of a junior person and had risen through the ranks. And so what they'd done is they'd stacked a bunch of money in front of me, a bunch of new stock options that I would vest into over time if I stuck around. And I had the most amazing job. I worked in this role where I got to do kind of anything I wanted there. I got to start any new divisions I wanted, and I did. I started a big Spectrum division and Wi-Fi division and worked on location-based stuff. I got to work on mergers and acquisitions. I got to solve problems for Eric Schmidt, our CEO, and Larry and Sergey, our co-founders. I got to travel a ton, do a ton of public speaking. I literally had the greatest job in the world. And the reason I know I had the greatest job in the world is about a week after I quit, I was sitting at my parents' house in upstate New York for the holidays, and I literally read a New York Times article, and the New York Times article said, "Why would Chris Sacca quit the greatest job in the world?" And I sat there and kind of cried. I was like, "Oh no, what have I done?" I was totally freaked out, but it turned out to be one of the most important and valuable and rewarding decisions I ever made. And part of that was because despite having, I think what on paper looked like the greatest job in the world, the reality was Google started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, we talk often about the transition from being a startup to a big company and the politics that come with that and the hierarchy that comes with that. And Google resisted it longer than anyone I know, than any other company I know. I mean, even when there are thousands of employees there, they built stuff. Shona Brown, who is an unsung hero, she was one of the top for a long time, built these communication systems where we all in the company kept each other apprised of what was going on all the time. And so it felt like a startup, meaning every week we would type snippets, 5 things we did this week, 5 things we're going to accomplish next week. And you hit publish on those, and they were shared with everybody in the company who wanted to see them. You'd publish OKRs. OKRs were your objectives and key results for the quarter, what you personally were going to do that quarter, and then you'd score yourself at the end of the quarter on how you did, and then you'd set new goals. Those are available to everyone in the company. We all had internal resumes, which were kind of amazing. Next to our names, we had not just the resume we used to apply to work at the company, which is always cool to still have that for all your coworkers, know what their background was and what their skills were. But we kept internal resumes of what we accomplished while we worked there. And so you kind of knew, hey, is this person getting cool stuff done? What are their skills? What are their interests? What have they been working on? Maybe I should recruit them to come work on my project. We had project requirements documents and notes from every meeting that were shared. At the end of the meeting, the notes were not a secretarial function, but they were a really important way of sharing knowledge. And so there was all this stuff there that kept that company feeling small for the longest time. And yet, in the end, by 2007, I would find myself in meetings where the first question is people would ask, what are you doing in this meeting? Rather than for years, it's like, oh, cool, you're here. We can help. We have extra, that way we have extra minds and bodies on the job. Instead, people felt really threatened by someone from outside their territory. There was one particular moment for me where a young woman who worked on my team, I think she was literally 22, first job out of Stanford, had gone and without any permission at all, had flown to Ontario and convinced Research in Motion, the company that ran BlackBerry, to install Google Talk on all of their handsets for free. They weren't going to charge us any money. That's normally the kind of deal where you as a software application company would pay them to install that. And remember, this is back in the days before you could just go download a bunch of apps. Your apps were basically whatever your device manufacturer, your carrier put on that phone for you. And so she flew to Ontario and she did this deal. She submitted it to legal review really quickly. They said, yep, it's legit. They made a couple of changes to the paperwork, all good. And then she came back and showed us and we were like, holy cow, this is a product. Google Talk was a product that really needed distribution help. It's a competitor to Skype. We tried to buy Skype back then and couldn't get the deal done. And so instead we decided to build a competitor. And so this thing needed help. And so she went and got that done with just total initiative. And so I went and sent a note to the senior management team. And by then my visibility was higher and I was considered an executive. And I sent a note to the senior management team saying, hey, everyone, congratulations to Mary Himmencool. I'll shout her out because she still works at Google today and she runs one of their entrepreneurship programs there. So congratulations to Mary Himmencool, total hustle. Just went up there, found her way into Research in Motion, sat down with one of the co-CEOs, convinced them to do this deal. Holy cow, this is what Google stands for. It's amazing. And all these notes from Eric, Larry, and Sergey started going around like, the Atta Girl notes, like, hey, all right on. Glad that's still happening in 2007 kind of stuff. And then one executive who I won't call out chimed in and said, whoa. That's supposed to be my team's deal. And, because it got done outside of our team, we're going to invalidate it. So we need to tear that up. And poor Mary is like, wait, what? Can we all agree that what we did was pro Google? We moved the ball forward. We went through the proper channels of getting legal to review it. So it's a legit deal. But literally the mobile team tore that deal up and it never got done again. And so it was one of those moments where I just said, as a company gets bigger, people start defining themselves by their territory and their job title more than their actual contribution or the overall health of the company. And that was a breaking point for me. My skills are generalist. I'm not really a specialist. I'm pretty good at a lot of things and not amazing at any particular things. And so in those early days, I was able to float and be helpful in many, many different capacities. I could be some glue that would bind together different disparate parts of the company that didn't know each other and help them communicate and collaborate. And I could get stuff started. I'm a starter. But as I started to see the politics and the territory getting in the way of the overall health of the company, that's when it started to break for me. And in parallel, I'd already made 2 startup investments. I invested in PhotoBucket, was my first one, and I didn't really have the money, so I wrote it on a 2 credit card check. And by then, that was doing really well. And then I'd also invested in Twitter. And it wasn't clear at the time that Twitter was going to be, this globally dominant media platform. But it was obvious that we had something special in our hands. And the time I would spend hanging out at their office, either before Google or after Google or on weekends, I felt alive. I felt like we were working just expressly on product and thinking about users and thinking about the future and not thinking about what, I think people often refer to as TPS reports and the politics of cost center something fell into. And that was invigorating. And so there I was right around just after Thanksgiving of 2007. And I said, I'm going to leave. And a couple of my friends even said, hey, look, you've been here 4 years. You now get a sabbatical. You get to get paid for 2 months of not working. Like, go take your sabbatical. And I I could have used the money. I mean, that was just free money and free vested. And yet it just occurred to me, I was like, I really just want to move on. This is great, but I want to get back into startups. And so I walked in and let Larry and Sergey know that my last day would be in a couple weeks. And they were super cool about it. They threw me a big party, and I left there with a bunch of friends and consider myself a really proud alum of Google. I'm very grateful for everything I learned there, and I still believe deeply in that company. But I just suddenly found myself outside of Google with, again, more money than almost, every person on the planet. But at less than $1 million, that's not the kind of money you need to get into angel investing. I didn't know any outside investors. I didn't have a plan to be a venture capitalist. I wasn't even really sure what I was going to do. I just knew I needed to pull the trigger and do something different and smaller and more entrepreneurial, something over which I had more control over my own destiny and no politics, and where I would define my own fate.
Which is pretty incredible, especially. Tony Hsieh is up next. Tony is the CEO of Zappos.com and has also done many other things. Tony talks a little bit about a trick, once again, in the decision-making process. And a lot of you might be trying to make a decision about your own why not now. And you might have gone through the pro and con list. You might have created a spreadsheet, who knows? But I think this specific trick that Tony has to offer is pretty smart. And not only that, I've applied it now a couple of times, and I think it works well. So it helps you really better understand your intuition and also kind of train your intuition. Tony is full of these tips and tricks. If you enjoy this, make sure you listen to his full episode. Here's Tony. This art about the way that you come to those decisions. Can you shed a little insight on that?
I think things never turn out the way you predict they will turn out. So rather than try to, from my point of view, expend all this energy into all these what ifs, when chances are 99.9% of those what ifs aren't going to happen, I'm a big believer in just going and trusting your gut and intuition. And that's not to say that it won't ever be wrong, but I'm a big believer in, I forget which book that Malcolm Gladwell wrote. I think maybe it was Blank. His whole, you need 10,000 hours of practice to be really good at something. And so that could be, to be a good golfer or to be a good piano player, you need 10,000 hours of practice. And I would say the same thing is true for training your intuition in a particular area. And so your intuition may be wrong more often in the beginning, but it's a learning process just like anything else. And I would say if you actually do spend 10,000 hours of practice and basically try to be more intuitive in your decision making, then your intuition will get better and better. Because I know people that want to approach decisions very rationally and make on a piece of paper, divide onto two sides, and what are the pros and cons of a possible decision. And what's interesting is, so I know some people that do that, and then one column will rationally be better than the other, and so they go with what rationally is correct if you're just looking at that piece of paper. And a lot of times they end up actually not happy, down the line with the decision they made. I actually just read about someone was advising actually the best way to make a decision is to go through the effort of making that and listing out all the pros and cons on a piece of paper. And then after you're done with that, then throw the paper away and then make your intuitive decision. And they said that gets you the best of both worlds.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to try that. Something that it's time to get your why not now on.
So one of the things that book I mentioned earlier, Getting Things Done, talks about is making sure that anytime you have a random idea about something, if it's just in a brainstorm idea for now, to just put it into your someday maybe list. And so the other thing the methodology talks about is once a week, and I usually do this Friday early afternoon, do your weekly review, which means going through your priority list and see what's going to review the past week of things you did and see what's coming up for the next week. But one of the items is also go through your someday maybe list. And I think a lot of us, and definitely me in the past, would come up with some random idea, or it could be, oh, we should do a trip to the Galapagos Islands one day or whatever. And then maybe a month later, you've forgotten about that until someone randomly brings it up again. And so I guess having that discipline to do the weekly review every Friday afternoon, which takes a few hours, and but it includes going through that someday maybe list. And for me, is really making sure that all those ideas don't end up getting forgotten. And as your life priorities change and so on, you can maybe delete some of them. But basically, it forces you for once a week to ask yourself, why not now for each of these someday maybe things. And so I guess for me, I'm kind of in the habit of, I guess before I was kind of more intuitively asking that by default, whereas now it's even formalized into this weekly process of really, is this still interesting to me as an idea or as a possible trip or business idea? And if not, then should remove it from the list. And if so, then is this week the week to just take the very next small step towards enacting that.
Making it happen. I love the someday maybe list. In the past, I've kind of considered that the idea graveyard or the idea garden, where you put it, kind of shelve it, but actually having a list.
But then you never look at it again if it's called the idea graveyard.
It's dead, right? But if it's a garden, you're planting a seed that you may want to water later, that you could revisit. So maybe my Evernote will be my idea garden. That's very interesting. So are there any? They have the edge. And what advice would you give to your younger self? And you can choose the age. This is the last question.
Yeah, so sometimes I have college kids ask me the question for them, or first-time entrepreneurs, and I'd say that my advice is pretty much the same. It's be unapologetically true to yourself, and if you broadcast who you are to the world, then over time, your tribe will find you.
Love it. Wow. That's a great way. And last, we have Sophia Amoruso. She is the founder of Nasty Gal. She is the founder of Girl Boss, which was a book. It's a movement. Now it's going to be a TV show on Netflix, which I'm super jazzed about, coming in April 2017. And Sophia, this is one of the snippets that I enjoyed the most from Sophia, is learning about how she got started and her own why not now moment. And she came to a point where she actually asked herself, well, why not me? Why shouldn't I do this? And so I think it's really powerful. It's like, why not now? And if not now, then when? And also asking, why not me? And if not me, then who? So that's a bit of a trigger way that you might be able to answer your own why not now moment, or at least give yourself a little bit of momentum. Here's Sophia. Think of a time when you specifically were in that moment and kind of dissect it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest why not now moment in my life was, sitting in the lobby of an art school in downtown San Francisco when I was 22 years old, and it was my job to check student IDs. I was a cheaper version of a security guard, so my title was campus safety host.
Nice.
And I know, and I was on MySpace. This was before Facebook had really taken off. I was on MySpace and was getting friend requests from eBay sellers who were selling vintage clothing and promoting their businesses on MySpace. And so I clicked through to see what it was that they were up to and what they were selling, and was like, wow, this stuff is so expensive and people are bidding on it. So that means that people are willing to pay that. That's what they think this is worth. And I only wore vintage clothing at the time. I knew where to find it. I knew where to find it way cheaper than what they were selling it for on eBay. I had a computer and a digital camera, and I thought, what, why not now? Why not, start my own eBay store? And, that was almost 10 years ago now. And, Nasty Gal's a pretty large business, and I've written a book about it. And, but I think the ultimate kind of why not now moment was, if someone else can do this, why shouldn't I?
Well, that's what's so interesting is that some people wouldn't have probably asked themselves that.
You're right. And yeah, I think it was, when you're 22 and don't have a lot to lose, it's a lot easier to ask yourself, why not now? I think the more responsibilities you have, it becomes harder to say, why not now? But, when you're onto something, it's always worth exploring. But how you do that safely, I think, depends on how much you have to lose.
Sure, that it makes a lot of sense. It was so the why not now kind of philosophy in watching you start with one jump, and then there was another, and then you're building Nasty Gal, and you went until 2012 before you even went out and raised any money, right?
Yeah, I really cobbled it together from day one. The way a lot of small business owners do, and I didn't realize I was starting an internet company or was a founder or, would ultimately be considered a CEO. I was just the CEO of my bedroom for a long time.
Did you find yourself graduating a bit when it came to the jumps in asking yourself why not now or taking risks? So did you start to kind of build that muscle in a way and practice and get bigger and bigger in terms of what you would risk or what you would do?
I think so, but I think, at a certain point, once you kind of open up the why not now, opportunistic, looking for opportunities, mindset, it's easy to find things everywhere. And the challenge is in choosing what not to do now, I guess, because, in the beginning, doing everything now is totally possible. And then, once you have something that you're really invested in, you have to make more choices and you have to focus. And there's one thing I've learned in, 10 years, it's focus. But yeah, I would say it gets easier, but then it gets more challenging because you've experienced what, shooting from the hip or just doing things without, really planning them, it can be amazing, but it can also be, really messy. So I think even when you do ask yourself, why not now, stopping to say, well, how and what does this look like a few years from now to make sure that what you are doing now is something that, that'll continue to make sense and not get you in over your head and you're doing with the right team is really important.
And given that you did end up going out and raising yourself, or what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about asking themselves the why not now question?
I would just say that life is for the taking, that whatever you want is for the taking. And the only difference between you and the people that you admire is that they're doing it. So you should just do it and, don't be too impressed by other people because they're not that different from you.
I love that Sophia said, don't be too impressed by others because they're not that different from you. And it's such a good reminder not to put people on pedestals. I recently read something that Scooter Braun had shared on social media about not putting people on pedestals. And that's something that I definitely am trying to keep myself in check about. It's so easy to do. And actually, we're a lot more the same than we are different. So, quick Shelfie Club update, 2017. Actually, this book is one that I can't believe wasn't on the Shelfie Club. It's Where the Wild Things Are. I was going through a little bit of a creative slump, a little creative drought, and I got that book out. It took all of 2 minutes to read, and I love that book. It just reminds you how powerful that imagination is and can be. So why not get Where the Wild Things Are out if you have a copy, and if you don't, if you've never read it, please do yourself a favor. It's a children's book, and oh no, it helped me this morning. The other quick thing to mention, so I get emails, text messages, people sharing things on social to me about their why not now moments and kind of what they're going through. And two specific things happened over the last week, one of which they wrote a phrase within their kind of whole description and story of their why not now. They said all the right things and all the wrong things happened about the same time. And that was really interesting because I've noticed a lot of the sparks that, people use for fuel for their why not nows are negative things, things that you would perceive to be negative. Let's put it that way. The other thing that kind of goes along with this is someone that I know pretty well just recently quit her job. She was not happy, and this is not her style at all. And she knew she had to do that in order to kind of, I think, be more open to her why not now. And what can be perceived as a negative thing is actually in often many cases positive, and it's that kind of inertia we need. And also, I think that there's something to be said for when one door closes, another one opens. Yes. Sometimes it's hectic in the hallway, right? And even sometimes there's hell in the hallway. But we have to get through that in order sometimes to get to that other opening. So I saw this quote that was posted. I'm going to read it to you quickly and wrap up here. But it specifically just captured what I've been trying to say and articulate for a while. And it goes like this. They say, look before you leap. So look, but do not look for too long. Do not look into the void of uncertainty, trying to predict each and every possible outcome, to evaluate every possible mistake, to prevent each possible failure. Look for the opportunity to leap, and leap faster than your fear can grab you. Leap before you talk yourself out of it, before you convince yourself to set up a temporary camp that turns into a permanent delay on your journey into your own heart. And that quote is by Veronica Tugaleva. I love the temporary camp that turns into a permanent delay phrase. That's so true, and I've experienced that many times. But thanks for joining me. Next week will be an all-new Why Not Now episode. I'm always appreciative of your feedback, and have a great week. I want to hear what your why not now is. Please share it with me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Amy Jo Martin. I'll send a signed copy of my New York Times best-selling book, Renegades Write the Rules, to the first 200 people who listen, rate, and leave an honest review of the podcast in iTunes. And you'll also get a free month subscription from our friends at Headspace. This is only available to Why Not Now listeners. Once you've left a rating and review on iTunes, just email your iTunes handle name and your mailing address to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com, and we'll get your package in the mail to you. For detailed show notes, head to amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. That's where you'll find links to things we discussed on the show, special offers, and how you can keep in touch with guests. Hat tip to my buddies Ash and Devin at Rock Salt Music for our tunes today. You just listened to the talented John Coggins in Let's Go and Let It Ride. And a jump high five to my talented husband, Richard Brewer, for producing the show and being patient with me. See you next time. Until then, why not now?